was telling Father Reese that, you know, we work on it so much and so intensely for so many days that, you know, we work, it's no big deal, but, you know, we just work day after day after day as it came up to the final vote. And so I may have a familiarity with this that you don't. I don't, you know, the reporting in the press, like usual, is not, you can't get it all from the press, let's put it that way. I think that the one fundamental thing you need to think about with this is that the bill is funded outside of labor HHS appropriations. So that means the Hyde Amendment does not apply. The Hyde Amendment only applies to appropriations going through labor HHS. The Health Care Reform Bill has self-funding mechanisms of various kinds and is outside of Hyde. So the whole debate about health care reform has been about applying Hyde. And the Hyde Amendment is pro-life, basically, provisions that don't let federal dollars go to paying for abortions, or, this is a critical thing that many people don't understand, or to funding plans that pay for abortion. Hyde explicitly prohibits both of those. So when you hear talk about the principles of the Hyde Amendment, those who disagree with me will say principles of the Hyde Amendment, and what they mean is direct federal funding of abortion. But that's only half of the principles of the Hyde Amendment. The other half is no funding of plans that provide for abortion. The language of the Hyde Amendment says so. Now, the Hyde Amendment is a yearly appropriations rider, so it has to be attached every year. It's not statutory law, and it can be repealed in any appropriations process. And, you know, a number of people have it's no secret that pro-abortion advocates want to repeal Hyde, and there are members of Congress who want to repeal Hyde. So that's the context, I think, for this bill. And as you know, it started in the House. There was a House bill, then there's a Senate bill, and then the bill came back to the House, and ultimately what was voted on was the Senate bill. Would the House agree to the Senate bill? And the objections by a number of people was that, no, we can't agree to the Senate bill because it does not have appropriate pro-life protections. And I think that when the bill was finally passed into law, it did not have appropriate pro-life protections, and I'll tell you what some of these. First of all, as I indicated a second ago, what the bill does is flip the Hyde Amendment on its head. Now, federal tax credits do go to plans that provide abortions, which is, I think, directly contrary to the principles of Hyde. And if you happen to be in one of those plans, you're going to have to pay, you know, $1 a month was their estimate to a special fund that will pay for abortions. But even aside from that, the simple fact that tax credits are going to plans that pay for abortions, I think, flips Hyde on its head. That's number one. Number two, the restriction on abortion coverage and funding in the bill is very limited. In fact, it's limited only to this issue of tax credits. So the bill does a lot more than provide tax credits to certain Americans to use for partial payment of health insurance plans. And all that other stuff is outside of any abortion restriction. Now, we don't know what all that other stuff is, but one thing that was discovered was these community health centers, and that their funding was also going to be under this bill, and that's outside the restrictions in the bill on abortion. So, there's restriction. It's very limited. It only applies to these tax credits. It's also tied to the continued existence of the Hyde Amendment. I can read you the language from the bill, but basically if the Hyde Amendment is ever lapsed or is ever not renewed, then the limit on the tax credits paying for abortion lapses as well, which means that the money could go to abortions. So if you were a pro-abortion activist or believer, step two of this whole process would be to repeal Hyde. And you would start, you might not be able to do that now, you might not be able to do that a year from now, But 2 years from now or something like that, you might start in Congress efforts to repeal Hyde or to not renew Hyde. So that's another concern about the bill. Fourth concern about the bill is there's some provisions that I think are, we should call hidden mandates. Now, they're not all spelled out, but there is a provision in the bill requiring provision of preventative medicine, preventative treatments. Preventative treatment is a good thing, obviously, in the abstract. But when that was brought up in the Senate, an amendment was introduced to try to exclude abortions from coverage as preventative health, and that amendment was defeated.